Welcome to Fade to Black, a podcast segment home to ramen in college. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Devone Holt, a EKU alumni who is now the Vice President of External Affairs. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Always good to be connected with my EKU comrades. Glad to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad I got in contact with you. So I'm just gonna start off with some basic questions I have. So first question: What made you come to EKU?
Oh wow! I wish I could give you an answer that was full of wisdom and a decision to go to a school. But the reality is, when I was a senior in high school, the very first school I visited was Eastern Kentucky University, and I stayed overnight and went to a party and fell in love with the school because of a party I went to and never visited another school. Decided that Eastern was the school I was going to go to. And fortunately for me, it worked out really well.
That's good. That's good. What did you study here?
I was a journalism and English major. At the time, you had to have a minor if you were going to, no, I'm sorry, you had to have another major if you were going to minor in journalism. And so English was my major and journalism was my minor while I was there in school.
Okay. What did you want to take away from that degree that you were having?
When I was in school, I thought I was going to take over the world as a reporter. I worked for the Eastern Progress newspaper there. I was the news editor for the school newspaper and loved the idea of telling stories, reporting news. And I loved the fact that my job as a reporter was different every day. No 2 days were the same. No two people were the same. And so you got this well-rounded experience of the community and the people who live in it as a reporter. And so that was the expectation. Unfortunately, I had an internship with a large newspaper uh, that gave me a really bad experience and made me decide that maybe I didn't want to be a newspaper reporter after all. But fortunately, I had a professor there at Eastern named Dean Cannon who gave me a heads up about an opportunity at the University of Kentucky in their public relations department. So literally the day that I graduated from Eastern, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had a few job offers that I turned down with some newspapers. And Dean Cannon met me on the other side of the stage when I got my diploma and said, I know about this job at UK. I need you to apply. I think you'll get it. And sure enough, I did. And I started on the other side of the equation. Instead of working as a reporter, I was working as a public relations agent at the University of Kentucky, providing reporters information about the school where I worked.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So, can you talk a little bit more about what you did as a PR for UK?
Yeah, it wasn't too far removed from what I had experienced as a journalist. So part of what I was doing then, this was the early days, Jordan, of the internet. So when I was in college in 90 to 95 at EKU, there was no such thing as the internet. It had just started to bubble up when I graduated. And when I got to the University of Kentucky, part of my job was to figure out how to use email and the internet to share content. But still, mostly it was print, fax content to newspaper outlets. I would draft press releases that were essentially articles written by the school to share with the media to encourage them to report on information about the school. And then I became the first and youngest African American spokesperson for the University of Kentucky. So when the media called and had questions about things on campus, they would talk to me, and I would represent the school in a lot of those media conversations.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I kind of want to hear more about your timeline of how you got from being a PR at UK to actually going as vice president of external affairs for Goodwill. How did that kind of transpire? Was there other things in the middle of that, or were there?
Yeah, I wish I could say I painted this road and planned this thing out a certain way, but I didn't. Even from the time that I took my first job, it was not what I was planning to do when I was in college. But I've been very fortunate, Jordan, to have people recognize my potential and my abilities and connect me with opportunities. So, starting with the University of Kentucky, I took that job, but ironically, I was working at night when I was in college, sorting packages at UPS in Lexington. So I'd work from about 11 o'clock to 3 in the morning, the night shift, sorting packages for UPS, and then I'd go back to class. Well, when I graduated from college, I was broke. I didn't have any money. And so I got the job working at the University of Kentucky, but we only got paid once a month. So I kept my job working at night. So I would wear a suit and tie during the day and go to UK and be a spokesperson for the college, the university. And then at night, I would go sort packages for UPS in these dirty blue jeans and dirty t-shirts and boots and go home, take a nap, and do that all over again. Well, I wound up doing that for 3 years, worked day and night at the University of Kentucky during the day, at UPS at night. And then I got word that UPS Airlines here in Louisville, Kentucky was expanding their PR department and wanted someone to fill an entry level role. Well, they realized that I've been working at UPS sorting packages and that I've been working at UK in the PR department and thought it was a match made in heaven. And it turns out it was. And so that brought me back to Louisville in 98. And I thought I was going to retire from UPS. It's one of the best places I've worked, one of the best environments I've ever been in. But I got an offer to go work for an internet startup company who dangled a huge paycheck in front of me. And so I left UPS to go take this job to manage the external affairs, public relations work for an internet startup company. And it did what a lot of the other internet startups did, Jordan. It went out of business.
Yeah.
And when it did, I was fortunate enough to have a former coworker of mine who had worked at UPS with me, but had at that time become president of the local chamber of commerce. And he said, "Why don't you come on over to the chamber? You've got some transferable skills that I think will work well in our economic development department." And so I became an economic development director. And I joke, Jordan, and I tell folks the kid who took one economics class at EKU became the economic development director for the city of Louisville.
Wow.
It's funny how those things happen. And then that went well. I did that for a long time and got an offer to do some work for a number of other agencies, and it decided that instead of going to work for one of them, I would open my own agency and do economic development work for a lot of them. And so I started my own agency for about 2 years, 2.5 years. I did that before I got a job offer from the superintendent of our school district here in Louisville to come serve as the assistant superintendent for Jefferson County Public Schools. And that was essentially an external affairs job where I was focused on community affairs, public relations, communications, a lot of that stuff. And I did that for about 4 years and shifted gears to a company called Rescare Workforce Services, where I managed workforce programs for this company that had a national footprint. I traveled the country for 6.5 years in that role before this opportunity with Goodwill came open for me to do some work right here in my own hometown in Louisville, Kentucky. And so it's been a long, windy road that I would have never predicted I would have been on. I never would have predicted I would have been in economic development. I would have never predicted I would have been in workforce development. The one constant that I tell people, especially young folks who are trying to figure out how to build pathways of opportunity for yourself, the one thing that I always was able to leverage and help me get these incredible job opportunities was my ability to communicate. And I learned that at EKU. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to speak. I learned how to write. I learned how to present. And all of those things are still skills that I use today, right now, in my job with Goodwill Industries of Kentucky.
Wow.
Mhm.
That is a story.
Mhm.
So switching gears a little bit, I saw on your I think I don't remember which one where I saw it at, but I saw that you had a I think radio show or
Yes.
a radio show,
Yeah,
Saturday Morning Solutions.
that's right. You did some good homework.
Yeah, I tried, I tried. So,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit more about that? What happened with that?
Yeah, it was interesting. A friend of mine became president of a college, the HBCU, Historically Black College and University here in Louisville, Kentucky, called Simmons College of Kentucky. And he wanted to start a radio show that really kind of spoke to issues that impacted the Black community. And he reached out and asked if I would host it. And I had been thinking about doing a radio show at the time. A few folks had approached me about doing one. And when he did, I already had some thoughts in my mind about what I would do and how I would manage a radio show. I did it for 10 years. I had two co-hosts who were on the show with me, but I produced it and managed the show for the time that I was there. And it was essentially a radio show that was focused on providing solutions to issues that impacted the Black community. So we talked about a lot of things, as you would imagine. We talked politics, we talked education, we talked economics, we talked workforce development. We had authors and politicians and community activists, entertainers, athletes as guests on our show on a regular basis. And it was a pretty popular show. I did it for 10 years and stopped doing it when it was no longer fun. And that was when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump for president. And it just became way too political and way too divisive. And the people I loved, I found them at odds with one another. And because I wasn't enjoying myself anymore, I decided to step back from it. But I will tell you, it was one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life to do a live radio show regularly where we allowed people to call in and be a part of a discussion about how to make things better in the Black community.
Right, right. So, how kind of do you think that a young individual or any kind of young student can even start going into looking into radio and stuff like that?
The beautiful thing that young people have that I didn't when I started is that you guys have the internet. You have access to thousands, millions of people in ways that when I was in school was only possible if you wrote for a newspaper or a magazine or you were on television or the radio. But now you've got podcasts like this one that has the potential to reach millions of people. You have social media that has the potential to connect with millions of people. You have websites and blogs. So many incredible opportunities for you to take full control of your brand and your message in ways that I didn't. The beautiful thing that I did have, though, however, were these strong resourced institutions, communication institutions that gave me those platforms. But I would encourage young people to do what I did when I was younger, and all of that still applies even with all these new platforms that exist now. I was a student of my craft, meaning I studied people and broadcasters and writers and presenters and learned what I liked about them. As a matter of fact, while I was at Eastern, one of the assignments I absolutely loved was an assignment that required us to identify one of our favorite broadcasters and talk about why we enjoyed that broadcaster. And I just remember spending time. It was a sports broadcaster who I was a huge fan of, and I studied him. And in studying him, because of that assignment, I started paying attention to other broadcasters, like, for instance, Tom Joyner, who's a radio legend. He's retired now, but he was the first African American syndicated radio show host in America. And I loved his approach. And I paid attention to other broadcasters. I paid attention to other writers, and I paid attention to what I liked about them and what I started to learn other people liked about them. What was it that they did that resonated? What was it that was good? And then what was not so good? And I started fine tuning my process by paying attention to what they did. And there's a lot to be learned from people who've got great experience at this and really take it seriously. So I would say find someone you like who's good at it and study what they do. Study from afar, and when you get a chance, maybe you get an up close and impersonal experience. I got a chance to meet Tom Joyner several times, and when I did, I asked him a lot of questions, and fortunately, he gave me a lot of answers that helped shape my approach as a broadcaster.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. That is, yes, I'm speechless on that one.
Yeah.
So, shifting gears a little bit, I saw that you also wrote your own book,
Yeah,
Hip Hop Slop.
I
Um,
did.
can you talk more about that? I didn't get a chance to read the book at all, but can you talk about like what the book was
Well,
about?
happy to tell you about it. So Hip Hop Slop is called Hip Hop Slop: The Impact of a Dysfunctional Culture. And Jordan, when I was your age and a student at EKU, I was a huge hip hop head. I love hip hop music. I used to DJ parties. I used to make mixtapes and CDs and all of that stuff back in the day. And then as I got older, I started mentoring some young Black boys, and I started recognizing the impact that hip hop had on them. And that hip hop was a lot different than the hip hop that I grew up to. And I recognized that so much of what they were influenced by was negative content. And so it was really my love letter to hip hop, asking it for the sake of our community, for the sake of the young people it was influencing, to find a better path. And so I wrote this book challenging hip hop and challenging hip hop fans to reconsider how they consumed media and to push back on a lot of the negative content that was out there. And I will tell you, the book, I wrote it and I sent it around, Jordan, to a lot of publishing houses. And most of them wrote me back and said, "We like the book, but we'd like you to consider doing something different." And I had a vision for the book and wanted to do it in a certain way. And so I asked myself the $1 million question, Jordan. I said, did I believe in myself enough to invest in myself instead of having my book published by publishing companies that didn't see my vision, that wouldn't lead the production of my book and the marketing of my book in the way that I wanted them to? Could I invest in it myself? And so I saved up my pennies and I decided to to produce and publish my book myself. I hired a design team to design the cover. I hired an editor to edit it. I hired a separate publishing company to distribute my book and help market it. But because I had marketing experience, communication experience, public relations experience, I did all that myself. And I tell people I call that book the little book that could, because all of that work put my book on a bestseller list. It became required reading in colleges all around the country. It sent me on a lecture circuit nationally, internationally, where I spoke to colleges and communities all around the country. And front page of the USA Today newspaper. And I got an invitation to speak before Capitol Hill, our national legislators, about the book and hip hop itself. And so it opened a lot of doors and created a lot of opportunity and really taught me that I had the ability to do those things that I was asking other media outlets to do for me. And so it just helped me build a lot of confidence in my ability to do the things that I thought were impossible, and in fact learned out that they were very possible when you had a vision and you decided to commit to it and connect yourself with the right partners.
Wow. So, switching gears again, how
Yeah.
have things changed about students of color in media or even society in general?
Well, I would say there's so many things have changed, and a lot of things are the same. I suspect things are probably better for students who are Black and brown on EKU's campus. I won't pretend that I had a bad experience there. I had several isolated experiences that were not great for me. A few of them were from teachers, several from class members. But through and through, I will tell you, I had a really good experience that expand my understanding of the world, and I got a chance to help other people who had limited views of the world see life differently through me. I'll give you an example. We had a student um, at EKU at the time who had just arrived from Costa Rica. She had never been in the States. And I remember the newspaper, I worked for the Eastern Progress, wanted me to do a story on her. And so I called her and I left a message on her voicemail. And we met to do this interview. And I noticed that she was nervous. And she told me that I was the first Black person she had ever met in person, and that the only Black people she had ever seen before were on Yo MTV rap videos, and
Mm,
NWA and all these hardcore rap videos. She had seen those and thought that that's what all Black men were like. Well, she got a different experience when she met me, and I got an experience about what it was like to know somebody from Costa Rica. And so part of that experience helped me expand what I think other people see in Black people. But now you guys have the ability to have your faces and voices seen and heard. Not waiting for the media to tell that story for you. You've got podcasts like this one and social media platforms where you can present yourself to the world and people can get a snapshot of you from a distance without having to have a conversation with you. And so sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad because people feel like they get to know you from a distance when they really have not gotten to meet the real you. But I do believe that there's a broad awareness, but then there's also this narrowing of an understanding about who people are and how they think. I think sometimes we have some people, particularly older people, who are committed to get all of their information from places like Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, which in a lot of cases can be slanted and help you get an unfair picture of who people are on the other side of the equation that they may be talking about. And so, my challenge to young people today is to show up in spaces, to be present, to talk, to be heard, to let people know who you are, and what you think, and what's important and valuable to you. Because if you don't, there will be people on CNN, there will be people on MSNBC, there will be people on Fox News who will assume they know what you want, who will assume they know what you like, who will assume they know what your priorities are, and dictate those things on their platforms for you. So my challenge for young people today is to speak up, stand up, be a voice, and continue to be present in spaces where adults would prefer to speak for you, but instead, my hope is that you guys would speak for yourselves.
wow. Did you have any major challenges coming from vice president of external affairs to even when you were back at your times of Easter? Did you have any major challenges that you had to face as a Black individual?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I work with and for some people who I was pretty certain did not like Black people. Definitely didn't like me. And unfortunately, I think that's a reality a lot of Black people faced then and still now, quite frankly. I think there's a growing awareness, though, of what our realities are as Black people that workplaces are responding to. So you've got all of these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at workplaces that are trying to make those realities not so real for people now. But for me, I did. And part of what, we all take different approaches to how we respond to those things. And quite frankly, I never really ran away from those tough experiences. Sometimes I wanted to, but I didn't for a number of different reasons. And because I didn't, I think I was able to do a few things. One, I was able to stay in places where maybe I knew I wasn't very appreciated, but there were things in those spaces that I was able to learn. And so while maybe I wasn't very appreciated by the people who were there, I was able to pick up things along the way that helped me understand how to maneuver and operate as a professional, to pick up things in those spaces that allowed me to become an expert at certain things. And so that was important. But one of the other skills that I think I was able to pick up was this ability to work successfully with people who I knew didn't like me or didn't like Black people to get things done in a way that ultimately benefited me and benefited Black people. In other words, like, I'm going to stay here until I get what I want from this place. I'm going to stay here until I gain something that's going to benefit me on my journey until my next career. Now, fortunately, I will say my scenarios weren't maybe as bad as some others who decided they needed to leave certain places because they were really, really bad. Mine were not so bad that I felt like I needed to leave. I wanted to stay and squeeze all the juice out of those places, Jordan, get as much juice out of those places as I could, because I always felt like there was something for me to learn. I always felt like there was something in that that was going to make me better. And so learning to stay through some things, tough it out. And I'm not suggesting that you always have to do that. Sometimes it does make sense to say enough is enough and it's time for me to go. But my scenarios were ones that were they were tough, but I was able to endure them long enough to get what I wanted out of those places. And I like to think that I made them better by staying. And now as a leader, I will tell you, I've gone from being impacted by environments where I work to creating the environment where I work. Those are two different realities. So when you have to be in a place and you just find yourself impacted by that culture, you just have to work your way through it. But when you become a leader, you have the responsibility of creating the culture. And fortunately, now I'm able to create culture using all of those experiences that I've had before. And I've told myself that I am not going to create an environment where people find themselves frustrated and upset because I'm not appreciative of who they are and what they bring to the workplace. And so there's been a lot of good that's come out of that. I like to think my work environments are better than the ones that I've worked in the past. But there were some tough roads that I had to go through to get to that point, for sure.
Speaking of kind of molding your own kind of impact on stuff and on things, how did you what was your kind of vision and what kind of drove you to kind of improve West Louisville, as you stated before?
Oh, wow. So West Louisville for me is home. We bounced around a lot. My mother was a teenager when she had me in high school. And so we bounced around a lot, and West Louisville was one of those places where we bounced around a lot. And it's one of the areas where I have some of my fondest memories growing up. People who nurtured me and loved me and supported me and cared for me and protected me were in West Louisville. Some of my best life lessons were learned in West Louisville. And so I have a fondness for the community. So when I moved back to Louisville after having spent time at Eastern Kentucky University and the University of Kentucky, I moved back to West Louisville, and I still live there to this day. Still live in West Louisville, but I've recognized the community that I lived in once upon a time. It is not nearly as vibrant as it used to be. West Louisville, unfortunately, is one of the poorest communities and one of the most underserved communities in all of Kentucky. One of the poorest zip codes in the state of Kentucky is in West Louisville.
Mm.
And so I just made a decision that I wanted to be a part of the solution, Jordan. I wanted to be part of the team and the individuals that would be responsible for transforming West Louisville and bringing it back to life. And fortunately, the work that I'm doing at Goodwill has allowed me to do that. We purchased 20 acres in West Louisville, and we're going to build what's called an opportunity campus. And we're partnering with Norton Healthcare to build a $100 million campus that's going to provide programs and services that help people find pathways to prosperity. And so I get a chance to be a part of the solution in the community. And it's probably, Jordan, one of the most meaningful projects I've ever been a part of in my life, because not only is it a big, bold project, it's a big, bold project in a community where I have the most love.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, do you have any kind of final thoughts on when it comes to young Black individuals kind of scared to show off their voice or to even be heard or speak up? Do you have any kind of final words for people to break that kind of hold that they have?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you and tell you, for me, I didn't start off with a big, bold voice. I didn't. I was timid, was unsure about myself earlier on in my ability to operate in those spaces. But the more experience I got, the more comfortable I became with my ability once I leveraged it and compared it to other people. I started realizing, you know what, I can do this, and my voice does matter. But one of the reasons why sometimes I was not as comfortable speaking out was because I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. I wasn't reading materials. I wasn't gaining an understanding about the issues that I felt were important. But once I started reading books and started talking to people who had expertise and doing those things to broaden my awareness and my understanding, my voice got bigger, bolder, and louder. And my hope now is that for young people who are uncertain about their voices and when and where to step up and how to do that, that you figure out first and foremost what's important to you. Start there. What's important to you? And then once you figure that out, start spending some time understanding those issues. You know, if it's race relations, if it's DE&I issues, whatever the case might be, spend some time understanding what those issues are, what those challenges are. And in that process, I'm convinced you'll start finding your voice. You'll start finding this passion build up around the issues that are important to you, and where the voids are in those issues, and where you can use your voice to fill those voids. Part of it though is just stepping out and not necessarily being certain about where you're going to land. Sometimes we feel like we got to have it all planned out. We got to know exactly how everything is going to work for us to take the first step. And I will tell you, you will never do that. You will never have it all figured out. Sometimes you just have to take a step and let things work themselves out. But here's what I will tell you. When you take that first step, and you realize that you didn't fall, that you didn't die, that you didn't ruin everything, it makes it a lot easier for you to take that next step and the next step and the next step. But the problem is, so many of us wrestle with, I call the paralysis of analysis. We want to continue to think about things and never do things. At some point, you have to stop thinking about it. At some point, you have to stop reading about it, and you have to do something. You have to act. You have to move. You have to contribute in some way. And it's when you do that, you take that first step, that the second step gets a little bit easier, and the third, fourth, fifth, it's easier and easier and easier. And then you'll ultimately be able to find your groove.
Wow. Well, that is all the time that I have for you. Thank you so much, Devon, for being here and speaking
Thank
to
you for
me.
this, Jordan.
Thank you so much for watching. It's been another episode of Ramen in College. See you.
To find more episodes like this one, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And coming real soon, I will also be moving this podcast over to Spotify.